My name is Sally McMillan. I'm a professor at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville in the School of Advertising and Public Relations. For my graduate school, I went to the University of Maryland for my master's degree and the University of Oregon for my PhD. My research area, in a word, it's interactivity. And that's probably what people know me for the most. But I actually like to think about sort of three big areas of research that I work in. The first is the impact of new communication technologies on individuals, organizations, and society. The second is factors that lead to academic success for students from diverse backgrounds. And the third is approaches to communicating with underserved populations. And that includes a variety of different populations. I teach advertising management, media planning, public relations writing, case studies, research methods. I also teach graduate courses in philosophy of science, mass communication, and strategic communication management. My favorite ad of all time is Apple's 1984 ad when they introduced the Macintosh. It uses literary allusions and outstanding videography to introduce technology innovation. It's a classic, talked about a lot, but for me it holds up through the test of time.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the Information Purification Directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests, obeying contradictory laws. Our unification of the laws is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
So in the remainder of this video, I was asked to talk a little bit more about my recent feature in the 3A's newsletter and answer several questions about that. So first of all, let me just say that I wrote that article in response to a request from the editor because I had recently been awarded the Ivan L. Preston Outstanding Contribution to Research Award. So I was asked to summarize my work, because that award is given based on sustained and systemic contribution to advertising research. So as I thought back over what's roughly 25 years of advertising research, I tried to think about all the different kinds of work that I've done and how it fits together. So unlike many researchers who've followed a pretty clear pathway in their research, I've kind of zigged and zagged a lot between different subject areas. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So I was looking for a metaphor that would help to explain my path, and the idea of braids came to mind. So that's why I titled it From Pigtails to Cornrows, and talked about sort of the simplistic pigtails I wore as a young child, and the more elaborate weave that would be needed to bring together the things that I've done with my research. I should say that I was an English major as an undergraduate, so again, one of the reasons I think I'm attracted to the 1984 ad is because, as I said, it uses literary allusion, and I've often liked to use figures of speech. And I've used them sometimes in titling my research. So I'm actually just going to read a couple of those titles from studies that I've done to give you an idea of ways that I've used figures of speech, and also the titles I think tell a little bit more about some of the work that I've done. So one of my most cited works is called The Microscope and the Moving Target, the challenge of applying content analysis to the World Wide Web. That actually grew out of my dissertation research. at the time that I did that research in the mid-1990s, there was no clear sense of how to conduct content analysis of web-based content. So I did some methodology work in thinking through that. Another, also related to content analysis, is called Searching for the Riddle in the Website, Coding Interactivity in Online Content Analysis. So getting very specific about this concept of interactivity, which has underlied much of my research, and how to code for that. Then another article that I wrote with a dear colleague who's now departed, Margie Morrison. It's called Coming of Age with the Internet, a qualitative exploration of how the internet has become an integral part of young people's lives. Soapbox, or Box of Soap, consumer understanding of the news, advertising, and funding sources for user-generated content. So as we've moved more into the context of social media, really looking at how members of the public understand the differences between things that used to have very bright lines, advertising, public relations, news, and now are all presented together in the same context. Some of my work related to underserved populations, the return of the house call, the role of internet-based interactivity in bringing health information home to adults. One of my favorite titles, although it was just kind of a little side piece of research that I did, was called Nailing Jello to the Wall and Herding Cats, a content analysis of Chinese and US newspaper coverage of the internet in China. And the final title that I read to you is Balancing Access and Success, a case study of how land-grant institutions serve low and middle income students. So that's a piece that's from my more recent research about student success. So how did I get from online content analysis to qualitative exploration of technology adoption to health communication to international communication to studying how land grants serve low income students? Bottom line, I followed my interests. So when there was no clear path, I tried to create one. Well, and I often drew on my own experience. So as I saw my parents aging, I saw them using the internet for health-related information. And I thought, that's interesting because most of the literature suggests that senior citizens are disenfranchised from online communication. But what I found with my colleague, Wendy Macias, and this research was actually funded with a 3A's grant, was that in fact this phenomenon was fairly widespread, and we were able to look at it in kind of a holistic way. The piece about nailing Jello to the wall came out of a trip I took to China. I actually traveled there with my husband, who is a former journalist, and we went with a journalist organization. So I was really there just kind of as the interested spouse, but became very interested in how the Chinese internet was developing and how that was being portrayed both in China and the US. So just a quick study that I never did any additional follow-up on, but it grew out of an interest. And then I spent a fairly large chunk of my career working in central administration, both as an associate dean and as a vice provost. And it was in that role that I became aware of how policy shapes the student experience. And so I started looking for patterns, and that's really become kind of a core interest of mine right now. So I'm always looking for the weave. I'm looking for the tapestry, because life is a tapestry. And as academic researchers, we are really lucky to be able to follow our passions and be part of making new patterns. So from my first 3A's conference presentation when I was a grad student to the recent Ivan L. Preston Award, the Academy has been a constant support as I've pursued my research passions. So I thank you very much.